How's it guys? Welcome back to the Burton Builds Garage. In today's episode, it kind of follows on from one of the previous videos we did where we replaced the clutch, the pulley and the coil assembly on our AC or air conditioning compressor on one of our vehicles. As part of that job, I also recommend checking the idler pulleys. Now on my vehicle, it's a 2006 model Hilux, the 2.7 VVTi petrol. There are 3 idler pulleys. One of them is over here. 2 of them are on the bench ready to be repaired. So that's what I'm going to show you guys today, how to replace the bearings in these idler pulleys. You don't have to go and buy a brand new pulley. Just go down to your local bearing supply store, buy the bearing, and we'll have a look at how to replace that. You can actually hear, if I shake this bearing, there's part of the race is actually damaged, and if I spin it, you should be able to hear that it's making a noise. This is going to cause a whine when it spins. Likewise, those 2 bearings aren't as bad, but they definitely need to be replaced. Let's go have a look how to do it. So here are our 3 idler pulleys. They are all slightly different. 2 of them have got double sets of bearings, so there's one race over there, one race over there, and this one has just got a single bearing inside. All we have to do is to press this bearing out the back of the, well, in fact it's out the front, so we'll press the bearing out the front of the pulley. It'll come out this side, and then we'll press a new bearing in there, and literally that is it. It's that simple. Now you can do this with a vise. We've got a vise here, or if you've got a very small press, you know, I've made one out of a bottle jack. That also works well. That is what we're going to do today. So before we press any of the old bearings out, make sure that you can actually get new bearings. We've got 4 over there for those other 2, and we've got a single bearing. This is a, where is it here? 62032RS, so pretty common size bearing, and that matches the number on the inside of our bearing. Just make sure you get the right ones. You don't really want to be damaging it and then realize, oh jingos, you can't actually get the correct bearing. So pressing this out, we are going to press on the inner race here, and then we're going to press it out of the pulley. Just remember, very important, when you press the bearing back in, don't press it in using the inner race. You press it in using the outer race. If you end up pressing it in using the inner race, you're going to damage a brand new bearing, and that's not what you want to do. In this case, I'm using NSK bearings, Japanese bearings. They're also very good quality. Actually, it matches the bearing that is in here. This is also an NSK. So what we're going to do to press this out, a little bit of a naughty little trick here, using a socket. This is the number 11 half-inch socket, but just get the one that's going to fit your bearing. This one goes on the inner race, and then we'll open up the vise and basically just squeeze the whole lot together. Now, as I said, you can use a press, probably better to use a hydraulic press. Also, before we continue here, remember to put on your safety glasses. I'm going to go and fetch those quick. Got the spectacles on, and we are going to press this. There we go. And as I tighten the vise, the bearing is actually starting to press out of our pulley. There we go, I can feel it's bottomed out already. So if we have a close look, our bearing is actually almost all the way out. So I'm actually going to now need to get something to press on the outside here so that we can continue pressing the bearing, because this bearing and the socket now is pressing up against our jaw and our vise. Just grabbed this tiny piece of scrap metal I had lying around, and it's got a big enough gap on the inside for the bearing to press through. So we'll just align that up and then continue pressing. That should work just fine. There we go. I think the bearing is out. Yo, it is so close to being out. Our socket is now bottoming out on the jaw, so we need to find something else now to actually press in there. We could probably just pop this little bolt in actually. No, that's not going to work. Okay, we've got another socket which is going to go into that socket. Now, I don't really like doing this with tools. I mean, you should be using scrap pieces of metal or wood lying around, but I'm trying to get the job done with what I've got on hand, also in a reasonable amount of time. So it's not going to, there we go, it's out. I mean, it just took a little bump. We probably could have bumped it out with a hammer. And we can see here's our pulley. we're just going to push the new bearing into that side, and here's the old bearing. Also a good idea, maybe just to run a little bit of sandpaper around here, maybe some 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, bit of a rag. Just make sure that the surface is all nice and clean and not rusted, and then we'll push the new bearing in. Okay, all looks pretty smooth. Just clean this out with a rag, and then we're ready to go. Before we press the bearing in, I'm going to say it once again. Only press on the outer race when you're pressing the bearing in. So what I've got is a socket. It's the same size as the outer race. So when we press it, that's all it's going to push on. And what we'll do is we'll, by eye, line this bearing up as sort of flush and as level as we can. And then we're going to now put that socket on. We'll align that up, or we'll actually put it in the vise, and then we'll press the bearing in. So I'm just making sure that everything is nicely aligned here. We don't want the socket slipping off or the bearing pressing in and then actually bending the pulley. So just take a little bit of extra time to make sure that it's nicely aligned, and everything should work out. There we go. It's pressing in fairly easily. Okay, it's not all the way home. I just want to have a look that it is going well. So we can see that it's almost home. There's about probably 3 millimeters more to go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get something that to press on the inside here. So we want this jaw to be pressing on the inside where the bearing is going to seat, and not on the outside of this pulley. We don't want to bend it. So what I've got is just a piece of stainless steel. Actually, I think we'll use this. It's just a piece of aluminium. We'll pop that in there and continue pressing. That's it. I think it's home. It feels like it's home. Yeah, definitely. Cool. So if we have a look at the back there, we can actually see that the bearing is seated all the way around, that it's all the way home. Having a look at the front, it looks all like it did before, and we've got a brand new bearing. So as you can see, you don't need any fancy presses or anything. You can do this with sort of a decent size, a medium sized bench vise if you have one. Otherwise, the next bearing I will do with a press, and I'll show you guys how that works. So here's the second idler pulley. It's got a bearing in that side and a bearing in this side, so we're going to push both of these out at the same time. To get this started, I'm just going to put this face flush on our little press. Now this is a little homemade press using a bottle jack, and I've got another piece of scrap metal, and we're going to push once again on the inner race to get all of these out. There we go, it's cracked loose. Don't be scared if that happens. The bearings might be quite tight and set into the recess that they are pressed into, and as soon as they start moving, then they'll press out fairly easily. So I need to now find something big enough to put around the outside so that the bearing can pass through the gap. I think we're going to use the same piece of steel, hopefully. Well, let me check if it's going to work. No, it won't. The gap isn't big enough, unfortunately. Okay, dodgy as frig, we'll use these two scrap pieces of steel, and then we'll just press it out through the gap. Hope it's going to work. I'm pretty sure it will. There we go, bearings are starting to press out. I need to get another small insert. As you can see, I'm pressing now and it's flush, so we need to try and make a plan with that. This top bearing, or the first bearing, is actually almost all the way out. Okay. Got a smaller socket. I'm sure that'll be just fine, man. We'll just have to balance it in here. Oops. Okay, bearings are both almost all the way out. The The first one is out, there we go. And the second one is also almost all the way free. There we go, 2 bearings out. So you can see it's quite a lot less effort when you're using hydraulic assistance. Both bearings 6302, 2 RS, that means it's got 2 rear seals or 2 seals. So once again, we will just make sure that these faces here where the bearing seats in are nice and clean. You might need to use a little bit of sandpaper to clean it up and then give it a good wipe off with a rag, and then we'll press the new bearings in. Cool, looking good. Wipe it out with a rag and it will be good to go. So here is our replacement bearing. It's a 6302, almost the same as what we pressed out. Now there's a good reason why I said earlier, just check before you press out the old bearings that you can get replacement bearings, because the ones that I could get today are slightly different. They still have the same bearing number. However, if we have a look at the internal diameter, this one's got an ID of 15 and the original has got an ID of 10 millimeters. So I couldn't get these. I had to wait a couple of days. I don't unfortunately have a couple of days to wait. I need to get the vehicle going again. So a friend of mine came to the rescue and he turned up a little bush for me that's got an ID of, an OD of 15 and then an ID of 10. So basically this is taking us back to the same old bearing. And I'm able to get the job done right away. We're going to do the same as we did previously. Pretty much line up the bearing by eye and as flush and level as we can, and then we'll start pressing it in. So I'm going to use this socket once again and we'll pump it down, and it should start pressing down fairly evenly. Just be careful. There we go, it's starting to go, and this socket will be able to push the bearing all the way home. There we go, bearing is all the way home. Just remember, we are pressing again a bearing into a housing or a relief that is gripping on the outer race, so only press on the outer race. And we can check, yes, it is all the way home, so we can push the second bearing in now. Where is that second bearing? Here it is, same thing again, line it up by eye as level as possible. Again, put on the socket and we'll press it home. And there we go, nice flush and home, and we've got an idler pulley that is ready for service once again. And that's it. Now all that we have to do is install those 3 pulleys back on the vehicle and we can get it running and serviceable again. Don't go anywhere yet. There's one more thing I want to say, and that's also about pressing bearings in. If you are pressing a bearing onto something like a shaft, when you press the bearing onto the shaft, what you want to do is press on the inner race as you're pressing it on. You don't want to press on the outer race, otherwise you'll damage the bearing. In our case with the pulleys, it was the opposite to what I've just said. So we were pushing each of the bearings into a housing or into a pulley that is gripping on the outer race. So only push on the outer race in that case. I've said this a couple of times because it is very easy to make the mistake where you push on the wrong part of the bearing race and you actually damage a brand new bearing, and then you only really see that it's been damaged maybe a few hundred kilometers down the road, where it starts whining or doing some funny things, or even maybe seizing. Guys, that's it for the video. If you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. Also leave us a comment, let us know what you think, if you've got any tips and tricks for replacing bearings and idler pulleys, or actually whatever you want to tell us. My name is Burton, this is the Burton Builds Garage, and you guys will see me in the next video. Cheers.